The planet Valen was a masterpiece of balance. The Valen people, graceful and intellectual, had built a peaceful society based on respect for nature and harmony with the universe. Their planet, lush with forests, oceans, and vibrant wildlife, was one of the most beautiful in the galaxy. The Valen had learned to live in perfect alignment with their environment, avoiding any disruption that might disturb the delicate ecosystem they had nurtured for centuries. But all of that changed when the cosmic event occurred. A massive asteroid, cloaked in an eerie dark energy, collided with a nearby star. The explosion sent shockwaves through the galaxy, causing disruptions to the planetary systems. A ripple effect tore through the Valen's biosphere, creating violent storms, sudden temperature shifts, and earthquakes. Rivers dried up, and forests began to wither. The planet's delicate balance was breaking apart, and the Valen, despite their advanced technology, had no way to stop it. Desperation set in. The Valen had always believed they were self-sufficient, but this was beyond their ability to manage. The crops failed, the seas became poisoned, and wildlife began to die off. Entire cities were submerged or torn apart by raging earthquakes. The Valen scientists, some of the brightest minds in the galaxy, tried everything they could think of, but the damage was too much. Their planet was dying, and they were running out of time. In their last hope, the Valen sent a distress signal to the far reaches of the galaxy. It was a call for aid, a plea for help to any civilization that could hear. The message was clear. We are the Valen. Our world is dying. We seek help from those who have the strength to save us. Time is running out. The signal spread through the galaxy, reaching various civilizations. Some heard it and ignored it. Others dismissed it as a cry for attention from a once great species now on the verge of collapse. But one group took notice: the humans, the Deathworlders. The humans were known across the galaxy, though not always with good intentions. They had a reputation for surviving in the harshest conditions, their homeworld Earth a place where life had adapted to thrive under extreme conditions. Earth was a death world, in every sense of the word, where humans had learned to fight, adapt, and overcome the many dangers of their environment. The humans were warriors, survivors, and conquerors, their history marked by battles against beasts, natural disasters, and even other civilizations. When the Valen's distress call reached Earth, it was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as an opportunity for glory and conquest. Others, more cautious, questioned the wisdom of getting involved. General Serena West, a seasoned military leader with a reputation for taking on the impossible, saw it as a challenge, one that humanity could not refuse. The call had been made. The Deathworlders would answer. The humans prepared their most elite teams, highly trained in surviving the harshest environments. They were ready to face whatever challenges awaited them on the Valen world. But they had no idea what they were truly walking into. They only knew one thing: they were humanity's last hope for survival in this corner of the galaxy. As their ships launched into space, heading toward the Valen homeworld, no one could foresee the culture clash, the war, or the devastation that would follow. On Earth, the news of the Valen's distress call spread quickly. For some, it was just another galactic emergency. For others, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. The humans were a species known for their resilience, and they had faced more than their fair share of challenges. But what made this call different was the sheer scale of it. The Valen were a peaceful species, their planet one of beauty and balance, now on the brink of total collapse. The question on everyone's mind was, could the Deathworlders really help? General Serena West was among the first to see the potential. She was a seasoned leader, known for her ability to adapt and overcome in the most hostile environments. Under her leadership, humanity's elite forces had been deployed to distant, uncharted planets, surviving in places where other species would have perished. If anyone could make a difference on the Valen homeworld, it was her. West was no stranger to tough decisions. She understood that sending human forces to another world was risky, especially one as fragile as Valen. But the alternative was even worse. If they didn't act quickly, the Valen would not survive. And if the Valen didn't survive, who would be next? The galaxy was a dangerous place, and humanity had learned long ago that waiting for someone else to solve the problem wasn't an option. The mission was organized in record time. A fleet of human ships, packed with military personnel, engineers and scientists, was dispatched toward Valen. Among the crew were some of the best and brightest, including Dr. Jackson Rice, a brilliant scientist known for his work in environmental recovery, and Captain Maya Kor, a skilled tactician with a history of surviving in the most unforgiving conditions. As the ships left Earth's atmosphere, there was a mix of excitement and apprehension. The humans knew the Valen were in danger, but they had no idea how they would be received. Would the Valen be grateful for the help, or would they see the human intervention as an invasion? There were questions, but no answers. The journey to Valen took several weeks. During that time, the humans reviewed everything they could find about the Valen species, their world, and their history. The Valen were a peaceful, intelligent species with no experience in warfare or conflict. They were unlike any enemy the humans had ever faced before, and that made them even more uncertain. How would humans, whose reputation for violence and aggression was legendary, fit into their fragile world? As the fleet neared the Valen homeworld, the tension among the humans grew. They knew they were not just bringing help. They were bringing themselves into a world that might not want them. The Valen had sent their call for aid, but the humans were not sure if they were expected to help rebuild or if they would be seen as invaders. The ships finally entered the Valen atmosphere, and the humans began their descent. The lush green surface of the planet spread out before them, but the signs of environmental decay were clear. Cities were half destroyed, rivers had dried up, and the once thriving forests had begun to wither. The Valen had held onto their world for as long as they could, but they needed help, and the Deathworlders were their only hope. The humans had arrived, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But they were unaware that their presence would cause more than just environmental recovery. It would spark a cultural clash that could change the galaxy forever. The human ships touched down on the Valen homeworld in a cloud of dust. As the landing gear settled onto the planet's surface, the crew of the lead ship, the Resolute, began to prepare for the unknown. General Serena West stood in front of the massive windows of the ship's command center, gazing out at the lush landscape below. Despite the visible signs of destruction, the dying forests, the dry rivers, the empty cities, there was a beauty to the world that struck her. This was a planet worth saving. The Valen were waiting. A delegation of Valen leaders and scientists had gathered in a large open space near the landing zone. They were tall and graceful, with smooth skin that shimmered faintly under the sun. Their eyes, large and expressive, betrayed both hope and fear. They were a species of peace, not war, and they had never expected to need the kind of help the humans represented. Now they stood facing the greatest unknown in their history, aliens who could either save their world or destroy it. As the human forces exited their ships, the Valen watched in silence. The soldiers were clad in their battle gear, but their steps were measured, respectful. They had come to help, not conquer, but that was not something the Valen could know for certain. The Valen leaders exchanged glances, uncertain how to greet these new arrivals. They had heard stories of the Deathworlders, but these stories were filled with fear, not trust. The name alone suggested that humans were warriors, accustomed to violence and destruction. General West was the first to step forward. Her uniform was pristine, her face calm but determined. She knew this was a delicate moment, and she needed to make the right impression. With a few confident strides, she reached the center of the gathering and raised her hand in a gesture of peace. The Valen watched closely, unsure what to make of the human's approach. In the quiet, West spoke. "We are here to help. We understand the devastation you're facing, and we will do everything in our power to restore your world. The Valen do not face this crisis alone anymore. You have allies. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. The Valen leaders exchanged glances, searching for any sign of deceit in the humans' faces. The situation was unlike anything they had dealt with before. Peace was the core of their existence, but they had never been confronted by an enemy, or an ally, with such a history of violence. Finally, one of the Valen stepped forward, a tall leader named Velora. Her face was weary, but her voice was steady as she addressed General West. "You speak of peace, but how can we trust you? You come from a world of violence and war. You claim to be here to help, but we have seen such promises before. How do we know you will not destroy what is left of us?" West's expression softened. She knew the Valen's fear was rooted in their peaceful nature, but she also knew that trust would take time to build. "We will prove our intentions through our actions," she said firmly. "We did not come here to conquer or to destroy. We came here because we believe in your survival." Her words resonated with some, but not all. The air between the two species was thick with tension, and the Velen were hesitant to accept help from beings who had, in the past, taken what they wanted by force. They would need time to consider this alliance, but for now, there was no choice. The Valen were dying, and the humans were their only hope. The first meeting between the Deathworlders and the Valen had begun, but it was clear that the path to cooperation would not be easy. Both sides had much to learn about one another, and many dangers lay ahead. The days that followed the first meeting between the humans and the Valen were tense. The Valen, despite their initial hesitations, agreed to let the humans begin their work. They had no other choice. The planet was dying, and every moment they delayed was another step closer to their extinction. But while the Valen were willing to accept the humans' help, they struggled to understand the methods the Deathworlders employed. General West and her team quickly set up their base of operations near one of the largest Valen cities. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers worked side by side, trying to stabilize the planet's failing ecosystem. The humans had brought advanced technology, machinery that could purify the poisoned air and water, rebuild broken infrastructure, and restore the natural balance. But the Valen watched with growing concern as the humans went to work. The methods they used were harsh, practical, and devoid of the careful, measured approach the Valen valued. One of the first points of contention came when the humans began to clear large swathes of dying forest to build new infrastructure. The Valen, who saw these forests as sacred, were horrified. They had always believed that nature should be left undisturbed, even in times of crisis. But to the humans, this was simply a necessary step to restore the planet. They needed space for their equipment, and the quickest way to get results was to cut down what was already dying. Dr. Jackson Rice, a scientist on the human team, was one of the first to notice the tension. He had spent months studying the Valen ecosystem before arriving, but even he was starting to realize that the Valen's approach to nature was unlike anything he had encountered. He understood that they viewed their world as a living entity, one that needed to be nurtured gently. But the humans had no time for such subtlety. The planet was on the brink of collapse, and speed was their ally. "I know you don't like this," Dr. Rice said, addressing a group of Valen scientists who had been watching them from a distance. "But we're doing this to save the planet. If we don't act fast, the damage will be irreversible." One of the Valen, a young scientist named Leora, stepped forward. Her expression was a mix of frustration and sorrow. "You do not understand. This is not just about saving our world. It's about preserving the balance, the harmony. What you do now will have consequences we cannot even foresee." Ray shook his head. "We don't have the luxury of time to think that far ahead. If we don't act, your people will die." The conversation ended there, but the disagreement marked the beginning of a deeper divide between the two species. The Valen were starting to view the humans as disruptors, willing to sacrifice everything in the name of survival. The humans, on the other hand, saw the Valen as idealistic and naive, unwilling to make the tough choices necessary to save their world. While the humans worked to restore the planet's environment, They also began constructing defensive systems around their base. They had no way of knowing if there would be further resistance from the Valan radicals, or if the planet's natural disasters would become even more deadly. But every day that passed, the gap between the two cultures grew wider. To the Valan, the Deathworlders' methods were crude, reckless even. To the humans, the Valans' reluctance to embrace practical solutions was a sign of weakness. Both sides were trying to help the planet, but their approaches were as different as night and day. It wasn't just the planet that was at risk anymore. The fragile peace between the Valan and the humans was beginning to crack. Tensions between the Valan and the humans were growing with each passing day. What had started as a mission of cooperation was now spiraling into something darker. The Valan, despite their peaceful nature, were not blind to the changes happening around them. The humans were rebuilding their cities and purifying the atmosphere, but they were also disrupting the delicate harmony of their world in ways the Valan had never imagined. It all came to a head when a faction of Valan radicals, who had been quietly organizing in the shadows, decided they could no longer stand by and watch the Deathworlders destroy what little remained of their sacred planet. They were led by a fiery leader named Tarek, a Valan who believed the humans were not saviors but invaders. To him, the humans were a threat to everything the Valan had fought to preserve. Tarek and his followers, who had once trusted in the Valan leadership, began to rally the discontented. They spread whispers of the humans' destruction, claiming that the Deathworlders would stop at nothing to conquer their world and strip it of its natural beauty. They rallied support from across the planet, including some of the most influential Valan cities that had not yet fallen to the environmental collapse. One evening, as the sun began to set, the human base was suddenly attacked. The first wave of Valan radicals, armed with basic weapons and makeshift armor, charged at the humans' defensive lines. It was a brutal, unexpected assault. The humans had never anticipated resistance from the Valan, and for a moment, they were caught off guard. The Valan were not skilled in combat, but they were desperate. They had the element of surprise, and they used it ruthlessly. General West immediately ordered her troops into action. The humans, trained in warfare and equipped with advanced weapons, quickly pushed back the first wave of attackers. But there was no time to relax. This was only the beginning. The Valan, despite their lack of formal military training, had a deep understanding of their own world. They used the terrain to their advantage, blending into the forests and launching surprise attacks from the shadows. Captain Mayakor, a leader known for her tactical brilliance, commanded the human forces to establish defensive perimeters around their base. She knew the Valan were not soldiers, but their knowledge of the land could make them dangerous. The battle quickly escalated, with humans and Valan fighting in close quarters, their different fighting styles clashing violently. The humans had superior technology, but the Valan had something the humans didn't: a deep connection to their environment. They knew the forests like the back of their hands, and they used this knowledge to set traps and ambushes, slowing the human forces down. But the humans, though stunned by the aggression, fought back with an unyielding determination. They were survivors, after all, and they had come to protect, not to destroy. By the time the fighting subsided, the battlefield was littered with the wounded, both Valan and human. The humans had held their ground, but the cost was clear. The Valan radicals had made their point. They were willing to fight for their planet, no matter the consequences. General West stood over the battlefield, surveying the damage. Her face was grim, but there was no turning back now. The humans had come to help, but they had also become a part of the conflict. It was clear that the Valan were not united, and the path to peace was becoming increasingly difficult. What had started as a mission of aid had now become a war for survival, and no one, human or Valan, could predict where it would lead. The aftermath of the battle left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. The Valan radicals had been repelled, but not without significant losses on both sides. The humans, despite their superior technology and training, had been forced to confront a side of the Valan they hadn't expected: their fierce will to protect their world at any cost. General Serena West stood on the balcony of her command center, watching as her soldiers tended to the wounded and repaired the damage to their base. Her expression was hard to read. She had anticipated difficulty on this mission, but she had never imagined that the very species they had come to help would turn against them so violently. The Valen were a peaceful people, after all, or so she had thought. But peace, it seemed, was a luxury they could no longer afford. In the days that followed, the humans made an effort to heal the divide between them and the Valen. General West sent envoys to the remaining Valen cities, urging them to stand down and to open talks. They needed to find a way to work together, or the planet would continue to spiral toward disaster. The Valen leaders, who had once welcomed the humans with hope, now viewed them with suspicion and fear. Among the Valen, there was a growing divide. Some, like Valora, the leader who had once spoken with West, understood the urgency of the situation. They knew the planet was dying, and the humans had the technology and expertise to save them. But others, especially the radicals led by Tarek, felt that the Valen could only rely on themselves. To accept human help was to surrender their way of life, to bow to the power of outsiders who had no respect for the balance of nature they held so dear. It was a conflict that seemed impossible to resolve. The next few weeks were tense. The humans continued their efforts to stabilize the planet's environment, rebuilding cities, purifying the air and water, and planting new crops. But the Valen resistance didn't stop. Small groups of radicals sabotaged the human efforts whenever they could, destroying equipment, setting fire to supplies, and even attacking scientists who were working in the fields. Captain Maya Kor, who had been leading the human forces on the ground, was growing frustrated. "We can't keep doing this," she said, looking over the latest reports of sabotage. "Every time we rebuild, they tear it down. We're fighting a war on two fronts, one against nature and the other against them." General West knew Captain Kor was right. It wasn't just the environmental crisis that threatened the Valen. It was the deep ideological divide within their own society. The radicals would never stop fighting. If the Valen didn't unite, all the human efforts to save the planet would be in vain. And yet, there was still hope. One day, Valora approached West with an idea. She had seen the devastation caused by the radicals, and she knew that time was running out for the Valen. "We need to show them that we can coexist," Valora said. "There must be a way for our people to accept the help of the humans without losing everything we've worked for. But it will take a sacrifice from both sides." West listened intently. "What do you propose?" "We need a symbol of unity," Valora said. "A place where we can work together, not as humans and Valen, but as allies. We'll build it together, your technology, our knowledge of the land. It will be a sign that we can save this world, but only if we trust each other." West nodded. It was a risky idea, but it was the first real opportunity for peace they had seen in weeks. The humans would have to trust the Valen, and the Valen would have to trust the humans. The only way to survive this war, against the planet's collapse, and against each other, was to work together. The construction of the Unity Center was a small but significant victory. For the first time, Valen and humans were working side by side toward a common goal. The once tense atmosphere around the human base had softened. The Valen, though still wary, slowly began to understand that the humans were not there to take over, but to help. Yet, the peace was fragile, and not everyone on either side was ready to let go of their fears. General Serena West stood at the heart of the Unity Center, watching the progress unfold. The large structure was taking shape, a blend of human technology and Valen knowledge. The Valen had designed it with the natural environment in mind, and the humans had provided the tools and expertise to make it a reality. It was a place that could hold the promise of a new future, a future where cooperation was possible. But there was a problem. Tarek, the radical leader, had not given up. He continued to rally his followers, speaking of the humans as invaders, not saviors. The message he spread was clear. The Valen must take back control of their planet, or it would be lost forever. Tarek's words were persuasive, especially to those who had lost their homes and loved ones during the environmental collapse. They blamed the humans for the destruction, even if they didn't understand the full picture. The radical faction was growing stronger by the day, their numbers swelling as more Valen joined the cause. Tarek's followers had begun to sabotage the Unity Center's construction, causing delays and destruction at every turn. They had already launched several attacks on the human engineers working there, and tensions were rising once again. The Valen leaders who had once supported the idea of cooperation with the humans were starting to fear that the radicals were right. The Unity Center had been meant to symbolize peace, but now it felt like a target, a sign of surrender. The radicals saw it as an insult, a symbol of the humans' control over their world. They argued that to trust the humans meant abandoning everything the Valen stood for. One night, Tarek and his followers launched a full-scale attack on the Unity Center. Under the cover of darkness, they stormed the construction site, armed with weapons and explosives. The humans were not prepared for such an assault, and the peaceful atmosphere of cooperation quickly turned into chaos. Captain Maya Kor and her team fought back fiercely, but the Valen radicals had the advantage of surprise. The humans' weapons were superior, but they didn't want to kill their own allies. The Valen were their partners, not enemies. The clash between them was heartbreaking, both sides fighting for the survival of their people, but unable to see that they were more alike than different. General West arrived at the scene just as the battle was reaching its peak. Her heart sank as she saw the damage. The broken walls, the fires, and the bodies of the wounded on both sides. This was not what they had come here for. This was not the future she had imagined for the Valen and humanity. "Stop," West shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She stepped forward, holding up her hands in a gesture of peace. "We can't do this. If we keep fighting, we're all going to lose." But Tarek was already at the front of the battle, his eyes wild with fury. "You came here to destroy us," he screamed. "You took everything we had, and now you want to take our soul. We will not let you." West knew that this was the tipping point. If they didn't find a way to stop this war, the Valen would be lost. It wasn't just the planet that was dying. It was their hope for peace. The time for negotiations was over. Now, it was a matter of survival. The battle raged on, but West knew that unless they stopped the violence now, it could be the end of everything. The battle at the Unity Center was the breaking point. For hours, the clash between the humans and the Valen radicals raged on. The air was thick with smoke, the ground stained with blood. Tarek's followers were relentless, their eyes filled with anger and fear. They believed they were fighting for their world's survival, yet in their rage, they were destroying the very thing they sought to protect. General Serena West, covered in dirt and dust, stood in the middle of the chaos, her heart heavy with sorrow. She knew that if this continued, there would be no chance of peace. The dream of a united future for humans and Valen was slipping away with every passing second. With her mind racing, West made a decision. She turned to Captain Maya Kor, who was coordinating the defense. "We need to stop the fighting. Now," she said urgently. "We can't afford to lose more lives. The Valen who are fighting us now don't see the bigger picture. We need to reach Tarek before it's too late." Kor nodded grimly. "Understood. But we can't just walk up to him. He's lost all trust in us." "I know," West replied, her voice tight with determination. "But there's no other choice. We'll have to appeal to his fear, to his sense of duty. We have to make him see that this war isn't going to save anyone." West quickly gathered a small group of trusted soldiers and headed toward the front lines, where Tarek and his radicals were making their last stand. The sight of the Unity Center, now burning in the distance, filled West with both fury and desperation. They had come so far, only to be torn apart by mistrust and fear. As she approached the radicals' position, West held up her hands, signaling for them to stop. Her voice rang out above the noise of the battle. "Tarek," she shouted, "you've done enough. It's time to end this." Tarek, standing at the center of his forces, turned to face her. His eyes were wild with anger, his voice filled with bitter conviction. "You don't understand, General. You've come here to destroy us, to take everything we have left. You're not saviors, you're conquerors." West took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I understand more than you think," she said calmly. "I've seen what your people are going through, and I've seen what we've lost. But you're not the only ones fighting for your survival. We're all fighting for something. We're fighting for this planet, for all of us. But if we keep killing each other, we won't have anything left." Tarek's face twisted with disbelief. "You think you can just fix this with your machines and your soldiers? You think you can save us by tearing apart our world?" West stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "We can't save your world without you, but we can't save it by fighting each other either. This isn't a war to save the planet. This is a war that will destroy it. You know that, Tarek. Deep down, you know we have to work together." The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, Tarek said nothing. His eyes flicked toward the smoldering ruins of the Unity Center, then back at West. The anger in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something else. Doubt. "How do you propose we trust you?" Tarek asked quietly. "How can we believe that you're not just using us for your own gain?" West took a step closer. "You don't have to trust us yet, but we can start by working together, by rebuilding side by side. We can prove ourselves. It won't be easy, but we have to try." The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. Finally, Tarek lowered his weapon, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I don't know if I can trust you," he said, his voice low. "But I do know that this war isn't the answer." General West extended her hand, offering a fragile truce. "Then let's find another way, together." It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. Tarek's decision to lay down his arms marked the beginning of a fragile peace. The fight was far from over, but now there was hope. Hope that through cooperation, humanity and the Valen could rebuild, not just their planet, but their relationship. The days following the battle were slow and cautious. The Unity Center, still damaged from the conflict, became a symbol of the fragile peace that had been established between the humans and the Valen. Tarek's radicals, having put down their weapons, were unsure of what would come next. Some still clung to their distrust, but others, including Tarek himself, began to consider the possibility of a different future. General Serena West spent long hours working with Valora, the Valen leader who had stood by her side from the beginning. They met with Tarek and his followers, trying to repair the damage done by the battle. It wasn't easy. Old wounds ran deep, and the scars of war were not easily forgotten. Yet there was a shared understanding that they could not continue down the path of destruction. Both sides knew that if they wanted to save their world, they would have to sacrifice some of their old ways of thinking. The humans, led by West and her team, continued their work to restore the planet. The machines that had once seemed so foreign to the Valen were now being integrated into the landscape. Fields of crops, once barren, were beginning to grow again. Water that had been poisoned by the planet's failing systems was slowly being purified. The atmosphere, once thick with pollution, was clearing, allowing the Valen to see the stars once again. But it wasn't just the planet that was healing. The people were too. There was a new sense of unity, fragile but present. Humans and Valen worked side by side in the fields, in the cities, in the forests. They didn't always understand each other, but they were learning to listen, to share knowledge, and to respect one another. Captain Mayakor walked through the rebuilt fields one morning, watching as Valen and human workers gathered crops together. She had never thought she'd see this day, when both species would be able to cooperate in such a peaceful way. The memories of the battle still lingered, but now there was something new in the air, a sense of hope. Tarek, once a symbol of resistance, had become a quiet leader among his people. He had not fully embraced the humans, but he no longer fought against them. He had seen the damage caused by the radicals, and he understood that the planet's survival was more important than his pride. Slowly, he began to speak out in favor of working together, urging his people to trust the humans in small ways. The Unity Center was finished, standing tall as a monument to what could be accomplished when two different worlds came together. It was a place for education, for science, for diplomacy. It was where humans and Valen could gather to discuss ideas and solutions, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners. West stood outside the center one evening, watching the sunset with Valora. "We've made it this far," West said softly, "but we still have a long way to go." Valora nodded, her eyes reflecting the colors of the fading light. "Yes, but we are not alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I believe we might make it." The stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling brightly above the world they had saved together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, there was hope. Hope that the humans and the Valen had a future together. They had faced their darkest moments, but they had come through it, united.